Now, I've been told that I am harsher on international films, especially in a foreign language, than I am on American. Had this film been made in this manner, using the static shots and been in English, would I have? I don't think that's the case this time. There are films where maybe I was harsher on them. Not every film can be compared to 400 Blows or Kess that happens to be a coming-of-age story, has been said to me. I don't think that's the case here. I think these are real flaws in this film, and I don't care if it was in Zimbabwean or in English or Kraken. I do think this film probably a little overrated because I think people fell a little bit more for its pacing than I did. But it's subjective. I'm Eric Trommater.
I'm Nicole De Meneses.
I'm Jennifer Trujillo.
I'm Erin Brown, and this is World Cinema History.
This week, Let the Right One In, a 2008 vampire film from snowy Sweden. Joining us, Erin Brown, our normal co-host, Jennifer Trujillo from the Gilbert Baker Film Festival, and according to the AI that does our Spotify summaries, vampire director Nicole De Meneses. Jennifer, we're going to start with you. Give us some of your opening thoughts and any history that you had about watching Let the Right One In.
I am glad that I watched it. This was my first watch, and I am sad that I didn't watch it soon enough that I could then watch the American remake, because that would have been an interesting perspective for me to have. But I have time, just like anyone listening can do that and then write in the comments. This is my plan, maybe. It was a surprise. I thought it was sort of hauntingly beautiful in its shots, from the silent black and white entrance with just the natural sounds and the creaking, the sort of slow burn allegory of good and bad and realism and romanticism. And I just thought it was a pretty cool, chilling movie. You shocked me with not only a coming of age, but I think there's not just homoeroticism. It's a queer horror film. You didn't even tell me. Nobody told me. And I was like, what? It's a queer horror film.
Surprise!
I know. That was just delightfully fun. I was like, wow, everybody kept that from me. And I got to unwrap that on my own. And I was like, huh, look at that. That was cool and fun and interesting. And the music was cool. I thought so many of the effects were really fun. Just well done. What happens when a vampire is not asked in, the body in the ice, the pool scene. There's some really cool special effects that were executed, I thought, very well, especially for a first watch, right? Like, to be surprised and shocked and horrified and fascinated. And then from the movie making magic perspective, like, wow, well done. Like, what a great choice. They made some really cool choices with the shock and the horror elements and the gore elements. Another unglamorous perspective of vampirism. There's love, there's loss, there's loneliness, there's choices, some moral tales. Anyways, I enjoyed it. I really was excited, and I was bemoaning today that I didn't leave enough time to watch the American version, and I'll be interested to hearing what you all think, and then I will watch it and tell you what I think later. It was pretty masterfully done, and I hadn't heard of it. I'm excited about it. It was good.
Thanks, Jennifer. The American remake was a closer adaptation of the novel than it was a remake of the film. I don't think it's as good as the original, but on the other hand, I don't actually think it was a bad film, honestly.
Have you read the book?
Many.
And is the series ever going to happen, do you think? They talked of the
Showtime,
same guy.
they had some episodes.
Huh.
I haven't seen them because I don't have Showtime because I can't afford it. But yeah, they did. I think they started running them in 2022.
Huh.
So,
and Chloe Grace Moretz is in the American movie, which is another reason to watch it for me. So
Another thing this has in common, Nicole, was something that you pointed out last week, which is, of course, the child who is actually an old person trapped in a child's body. And I mentioned last week that I thought that was one of the most horrifying tropes in movies. But as a vampire film, this is actually the one I can think of where that is actually the centerpiece of the film. I can't think of any off the top of my head. And I do think that it gives an extra layer of depth to this film because it is actually taking that extraordinarily horrifying trope and placing it dead center of the film. First of all, what is your history with this film? When did you first see it? And what are your opening thoughts?
Yeah, I remember seeing this film when it came to theaters and just being pleasantly surprised, like Jen, with the queerness of it. But also there's something very relatable about like being an awkward kid and getting picked on. And so there's some odd wish fulfillment in the bullies getting what they deserve and then some. I love the last scene. The pool scene is fucking amazing. This is a subtle film. It is a slow burn, but I do like the reveal of the atmosphere and just the sense of dread that develops throughout the movie. I think I lean more towards the original too because I love Oscar's character and he's like this little tiny blonde thing. His mother's neglectful and he has all these like rageful thoughts and he doesn't know where to channel them. But at his core, he's like lonely. He's hungry for a friend. Like he's so desperate. And like when he's like, "You want to go steady? I'm not a girl." Would that change anything? I guess not. Like the idea that he's like at a certain time of coming of age where he's asking himself these questions and what does it mean for him and that he still doesn't know himself. So there's some really interesting coming of age stuff in this movie that I really liked, and just the casting. The bullies, like they're little kids. It's crazy how you can like watch something and be like, "Oh, I really hate this little fucker. What a little asshole." Like, the bullies are such jerks, and no one's protecting this little kid. And the idea that he finds a protector and somebody to, like, encourages him to stand up for himself, and it causes a series of events that unfold. In terms of some of the special effects, like, it's not, I know some people don't like this sequence, but I do really like the cat sequence, and I think it's hysterical, and I think it's a fun add to, like, vampire lore.
Right here, listen to the cat.
It's funny seeing what happens to people that get bit in this movie and the slow discovery of them realizing something's not right. And so I enjoyed the discovery in the movie, and I remember seeing it in theaters, and then I really had negative feelings when I heard they were remaking it, and then I did see the remake, and I enjoyed parts of the remake. I enjoyed parts of the way they embellished certain things, even though I think the casting was off in that Chloe Grace Moretz is such a sweet looking kid in that movie,
and too young, I thought.
Well, and in this one, I like the character has such a darker backstory, and I like that they're like not traditionally pretty, but also the tragic story of the characters that they're supposed to be, that they were changed when they were a little kid, and that they were abused and taken by a pedophile, and so they have such a darker story that they're feminized and they dress like a girl and they're living like a girl, but they know they are not that, but it's part of their cover and part of how they are surviving. It's something they've taken on that helps them, but they're not attached to that identity. But also in terms of subtle special effects, and I didn't, first time seeing it, it threw me off. And then I rewatched the scene where Oscar wants to mix his blood and he cuts his hand and then it's bleeding and Ellie starts lapping up the blood. There's a scene where it's really quick where then she looks back up and her face has changed and she's more like a grown man or has more adult features, and then switches back to the kid features. And so that scene that I watched a thing on how they approached that, and I was like, oh wow, that was a subtle thing, but it was effective.
Really? Really? Go!
And knowing that within this child is this dark monster or a dangerous creature.
I did like the way they did that by having that actually be two different actresses.
Yeah.
So you had Susan Rubin come in for the aged Ellie, and they used prosthetics to make their faces kind of merge together, as opposed to trying to use CGI or anything like that. I like the practical effects and the actual use of a more mature actress, because you ask yourself for a moment, hey, wait, is that the same person?
I haven't
Sorry, go
watched
ahead.
the series, so I'll have to check out the series just to, because I do enjoy this story. And so just to see a continuation of the story, I'd be interested.
Thanks, Nicole. Erin, your opening thoughts. I assume this was the first time that you've seen it, just based on your not being the biggest fan of vampire films.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it before. I'd heard of it, but I hadn't seen it. I haven't seen the remake either, which I also knew existed.
It was actually
but
your
hadn't
friend who
seen.
suggested this film.
Yeah,
She couldn't.
and
She couldn't
unfortunately,
be. We won't name her because she couldn't be here today. But she can go in the vampire circle of shame with Nicole from 3
Shame.
weeks ago.
Shame.
Bad vampire.
It was an odd film. Again, my notes are pretty snarky, but like, is he albino or just Swedish? You make the call. Because I mean, that's a pale kid, and coming from me, that's because you can't see it on a podcast, but I'm extremely pale. Her familiar was so incompetent. Why was he so incompetent? He was like the first person he killed was just off a walking path where there were people, and he gets caught because you can see the lights from the path. You can see the path from where he's stringing the guy up and hanging him upside down. So
he goes straight into that pub.
Yeah.
So that he'll be recognized, and then he complains afterwards that he'll be recognized. Now, all of these things were explained in the novel. Before we get too much into your opening thoughts, in the novel, Håkan is a child molester.
Oh, ew. Okay.
And that is why he became her familiar.
Okay.
Was so that he would have an eternal child to molest.
That's
And Nicole, you can back me up because you've seen the American remake. Is that plot point, the Tomas character who's based on Håkan, is something that they do pursue now it's only pointed to very, very barely in this. And his kind of ineptness is something that's actually detailed in the novel, which is much more terrifying. This is almost like the PG-13 version of that novel. The other thing is Ellie. You see briefly, it's hinted at that, because you see briefly when she's undressing, you see a scar between her crotch. When she was a boy, she was castrated.
Oh, I was wondering.
And that's
what
why
that
he
was.
shows that scar.
No, he was super incompetent, though. I thought it was weird, but now that I know that his character's a child molester, it's like, good. I'm glad he dissolved his face with acid and got his blood drained and fell out a hospital window. Who doesn't want that to happen to a pedophile?
Well, I don't think he fell. I think
yeah, he was kind of dead. Yeah.
I think Eli made sure he was thrown out of the window to his
What's the old saying? I didn't kill him, I pushed him, the fall killed him.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry, I interrupted.
But there's a great scene before that where she has to sneak up to his room, and if you blink, you'll miss it. I love how it's a big wide shot, and you really have to look for her climbing up the side of the building.
On the wall.
Yeah,
so cool.
It was so freaky. I loved it. I thought that was really great. There were a lot of really great effects in this that I really enjoyed.
She's hidden in the shadows in the first shot, just if you missed it. She's there clinging on the wall when the woman comes out looking for her.
The way they did that, they literally rigged her so she they didn't do any of your normal CGI stuff. They literally rigged her so she's climbing the wall barefoot.
That's awesome.
It's very cool.
She had to have torn her feet up on this movie, because she walks around barefoot in the snow. She walks on she's walking up the side of a building.
Yeah,
that cannot have been good for her toes.
Right. Yeah, there were a lot of really awesome effects. I liked the idea of the cats recognizing the vampires, but I thought the cat CGI was terrible. It was distractingly bad in my opinion, but I love that they could tell these are vampires, they're evil. I thought that was a really cool touch. And I'm glad the cats survived. They seem to have, unless I missed something.
Yeah,
Eyes were
unlike
really
the
weird.
mosquito last week, no cats were harmed in the
Good.
making of this film.
I would have been pretty angry if they'd hurt some cats. Her eyes were freaky too. I like when they went into that basement and her eyes were reflective for a second before the lights came up. That
Right?
was really
Very
cool
cool.
effect. Yeah.
And again, that was practical effects. Those are the old contact lenses, the old
Yeah.
I think the worst elements of this are the CGI elements, and the best elements are when they went with practical effects, because the practical effects in this are extremely good.
Yeah.
CGI, like you said, matter of fact, during the cat attack scene, I laughed out loud this time, and I was humming in my head, everybody wants to be a cat from the Aristocrats, because that's what they look like, the animated cats from Disney.
Yeah, they looked
It's
pretty
such a
rough.
funny scene. It shouldn't be funny, but I do like it. I just think it's so ludicrous.
It's a weird scene, but I love the concept.
I guess there's some humor in the way it's done, but I think it's one of those smart things. Like in the beginning, they showed the cats. It's one of those, you put things in a script for a reason and you come back to it. So that you're like, God, these people are crazy cat people. There's so many cats. And then the use of the cats I thought was clever, but there's also the whole long historical use of cats from like Egyptian times, from or lauded as creatures that protect the underworld or guard spirits or allow people to travel back and forth from both places, or they're definitely part underworld lore, right? Of crossing realms and the ability to cross realms and the ability to pick up on ghosts and spirits. And so I thought that part was really cool. I mean, there's the first small hinting at the cat, right? I think there's another time that a cat sees one of them and makes a noise, and then it
Yeah.
just builds. And I like that the cats did what, the film says to do, right? There's a problem, attack it, stand up for yourself. I don't know. I thought that was very cool. And the eyes, I'm going to transfer that. I love the eyes. I took that moment and rewound it, that they made Ely's eyes glow like a dog or a cat's does in the light. And that was really cool. But also their eyes and all the other scenes changed colors. I was like, is it contacts? Is it their eyes? I looked at a bunch of like still shots to try to look at the actor's eyes, and the eyes changed colors multiple times, and the size of the iris and the dilation of the eyes changed in some of the scenes, kind of like they did with the changing of the actor's face. I thought that was really cool.
It looked like the pupil changed to like a cat pupil in some of the shots.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was yeah, the effects in this were amazing.
To quote Luke Higginson, old school movie shit is the best.
Oh, for sure.
And this has some really cool old school movie shit in it. I think you're right. I think the weakest stuff is the CGI. The cats, I thought, like, unintentionally, or maybe Nicole pointed to maybe that it was put in there as deliberate levity, but when Virginia is exposed to sunlight and blows up, that looks horrible.
What?
But,
I was going to say, I thought it's amazing when she bursts into flames.
Oh, really? I thought that just looked...
There's an actor... There's an actor, I think, really moving in fire, and then they embellish the fire around it, and I thought it was great.
It looked like every bad green screen that I ever saw on YouTube, but I agree to disagree on that one. But then the ending scene in the pool, which was done with practical effects, is probably the best scene in the film. So.
It's the best scene in the film, but also I think what really makes the film work is the pacing and also the sound design, because I think there's some really great sound design that adds to like the dread and adds to the anticipation of what's coming. Like early on when the one woman who's been bit, she just gets her finger in the sunlight and we hear a sizzle, and then she realizes something's wrong and moves her hand out of it. And like, so we constantly get like these little sound triggers throughout the movie that are setting us up for something, like, or when Oscar gets whipped across the face and it's like just that little bit of sound. And then we see this slow red line appear across his cheek. And so I think the sound design is really good in the film.
The The gurgling belly, the hunger, that's a great sound design as well, I think, through the film, all the gurgling and growling and
When she breaks the neck after she has to go out hunting,
oh yeah.
they're strategic in what they show. It's not, I don't think it's overly violent. There's a lot of close-ups where like it's obscuring what we're seeing. I think it's subtle, but it's effective.
Yeah, like with the pool scene, they didn't show what Ellie was doing. You just saw the aftermath of what Ellie did. And the whole thing, you're watching Oscar underwater while like suddenly a head falls into the pool, and the blood starts coming down from the top.
And there's sound design in the pool, right?
Well, the
Yeah.
setup of the music. There's music in the boombox, and then it gets knocked, and it's a fairly happy song. But I was going to say what's really ominous about the pool scene is that there's one kid that didn't get touched at all that's still in the fucking bleachers, like that.
At the end,
yeah,
right? The kid that was crying, they
Well,
left.
they always leave
gave
one.
mercy to.
Last week in Near Dark, they always leave one survivor, don't they?
I just thought that was so funny that there was one untouched that had seen the carnage that we didn't get to see. So I just thought that was an extra layer that was interesting.
Yeah, that kid's gonna be fucked up. Erin, you had some snark. I love your snark.
Had less snark as the movie went on, but why was the kid drinking the pool water when he was every time you saw Oscar in the pool, he would like drink some of the pool water. It was like, what are you doing, child? He was a strange kid. I didn't understand his facial expressions a lot, but that could be the autism. But yeah, he had, and the constant runny nose. It's like, can somebody clean this kid up? What is happening with this child? And that's about as snarky as I'm really going to get, because like as the film went on, there was less to snark about because it was like that creepy and drew me in a lot. And I do wonder though, is Oscar now the replacement for the original familiar? Is Ellie using Oscar, or does Ellie actually care about Oscar? That's my big question.
Is Ellie grooming Oscar, or is it a real relationship? Or are they both going to be vampires with their own familiar? Or are they going to live out their romantic life and have another familiar that keeps them and protects them?
Yeah.
No, I think that's
the grooming element is really in there.
I think that's what's so upsetting is that, he's so lonely and he really just wants a friend, and he's susceptible to danger. He's susceptible to people taking advantage and preying on him.
Which went to the novel's original story, which this was a metaphor for child sexual abuse.
Well, and loneliness.
And the vulnerability of children.
And Eli is so lonely as well that Eli gets totally accepted by Oscar. Yes, it ties into the vulnerability and the want of those type of situations when you're isolated and alone and lonely and want human connection, and you want to believe it's real, genuine of connection and affection. It goes from friendship to romantic. But even in the queer sense, it's great. Like, both characters are very asexual. I think that's one thing that, I read later looking at it, how long they took in casting for this, and they did a great job because they're both sort of non-binary looking, and they tie right into that. Does it matter? Like, we can't be friends. And then it's like, okay, well, we're going to be friends. And then do we want to be romantic? And that part is really like, does it matter? And then there's some gender questions in there on that does it matter? And they're like, okay. And who's grooming who's pulling in who? I mean, that's another weird thing that Oscar fantasizes. He's in this bad situation, has been bullied, isolated from his father, who's an alcoholic, gets some time with him, but, his dad makes choices when they're together. When it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's even more isolating. His mother is, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde swingy, like he's alone a lot. And he fantasizes about these murders to the point of having that murder book, and he's practicing stabbing the pole or the tree when they meet Ellie in the first place. And so Oscar's someone who has these fantasies about wanting to kill but doesn't do it, and Ellie does it but seems to have regret or remorse, or does it because they have to.
That's a direct conversation that they had where Ellie says, you want to kill, I need to kill.
At the end though, he's seen everything she's capable of and he smiles.
He loves it.
He's on board. He is agreeable and he's willing to help. It's off-putting. It's a little off-putting, but it's like you're kind of rooting for them throughout the movie. They don't have anybody, and so it's, I don't know. It just it definitely leaves an uneasy feeling at the end. Which is
or sort of this want of, are they going to kill together and be happy? It's an interesting twist on what our perspective or choices are. You were talking about Oscar's nose running. It's incredibly cold there. I don't think that was put in. I'm betting this actor just runs when they're out in the cold. They turn pink and they run and snivel, but they left it in, I think, and just said, don't worry about it, don't wipe it, because it shows the contrast, makes him sort of more pitiful
Well,
or
he's the
lonely
kid
or
who never
unkempt.
wipes his nose and gets picked on in school. It's very classic. Growing up in Michigan, there was always one.
And it also shows the contrast of Ellie's out barefoot and dirty fingers, and they both have those elements in common. You're smelly, but it shows the tolerance for the weather, like being in the bare feet and standing in that. I mean, sometimes the snow is so frozen they don't even barely make footprints in it, right? And I'm assuming that was all filmed outside or whatever. Maybe it
Yeah, that's
wasn't, but
just life in fucking Sweden.
yeah, no, I mean, I have people there. It's cold.
If you watch it,
I mean,
if you
they're at
ever watch a Ingmar Bergman or Lars von
right.
Trier film, 9 months of fucking winter, people are depressed all the time.
Yeah.
You've got about 3 hours of daylight where you can do anything. Vampire life is probably preferable.
And then the opposite season, you have the days of no dark at all, which is even weirder. You don't sleep. Like it's always daylight. You have to block out the light to try to sleep. It shows it's more contrast and similarities between the two of them. And I don't know if the book explains. I want to ask that question about, do I smell? Is it because they're rotting when they don't feed? Is it because they don't clean up and they don't bathe and then they decided to bathe, and do I smell better?
It's because vampires have a smell. And the way the book explains it is humans have a smell. We get used to each other's smell. Vampires have a smell. They get used to it, but we're not used to their smell. This didn't work for me as a horror film because the scares weren't there, because the scares came out of Alfredson's direction. You know, we were talking about last week, and I edited this out of last week's episode, but I had jokingly said that half my notes were what angle and focal length lens was being used, by Catherine Bigelow. This film, if I were to make that, it would be like, oh, that's a 50-millimeter lens from a hi-hat. That's another still shot of it from a 50-millimeter lens from a hi-hat. Oh, that's a static shot of a 50-millimeter... You get where I'm going with this. And that was supposed to create the suspense. Now, I've heard this film is slow-moving. It didn't feel slow-moving to me. And this is something maybe Erin, because you've watched quite a few European and art house films this year, I think when you watch a lot of, especially European, but art house from around the world films, you kind of realize that international film moves at a kind of a different pace. And this really felt to me just like a traditionally paced Swedish movie. Absolutely gorgeous photography, almost too beautiful for the subject matter, but some of it was ridiculous. Like, for instance, the framing of that pathetic baby jungle gym that they meet at. What is that, a jungle gym for ants? And it had no possible purpose whatsoever. No child could play on that jungle gym. It was so short to the ground. It was built so that the framing of the shot from the 50-millimeter lens from the hi-hat would also encompass the buildings, and so that he could cut back and forth between the close-ups. If the jungle gym was too high, it would be cut out of the shot, and that's why you have a jungle gym that literally comes up to the 12-year-old character's waist. But the other thing that bothered me was, as an adaptation of the novel, a film should exist on its own and should be judged as a work of art on its own. The fact that it took out all of the more horrifying elements of the novel, but left in just those hints where those of us who had read the novel were like, oh, I remember that. Or you have to go back and find out, oh, that was what was in the novel. So the scar from Ellie having been castrated, that's cheating. If you're going to remove the backstory, which apparently and this is after the fact, but apparently they did film the backstory when Ellie was a boy and how he had been castrated and edited it out of the film. You then edit the hints out too. Same with the child molestation and hokum. Why leave in the he likes children for the wrong reason line if you're going to eliminate that storyline? I don't have a problem with him sanitizing the novel. I do have a problem with leaving the little bits of the novel in there without any reference point. Show of hands, who here, when they saw that scar, thought anything of it?
The genital scar?
Yeah.
Oh, I totally did.
You thought it was that Ellie had been a castrated boy just from saying that? I did.
I wasn't sure if it was castrated, mutilated, assaulted, but there were already all these other sort of small gender comments made and sort of weird. I mean, there were multiple homoerotic tensions. I even thought there might be homoerotic tension between the dad and his friend. And I was like, is it just the lure of the alcohol or is his dad also queer? I mean, it was kind of like the Silence of the Lambs moment with the skin suit body reveal and other things. It had that weird, eerie, creepy, what's happening with gender and what parts of gender have been changed or mutilated or cut off or on, or yeah, it was disturbing, but it made me think of a lot of different things.
It rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Did anyone else react to it or see it?
I saw it, but I wasn't sure what was going on, and I didn't want to go back and look again because it felt creepy to be looking at a kid's crotch. I rolled it back once and I was like, did I see something strange there? And it was so fast I had to watch it again, and I'm like, I don't want to look again. That's unsettling.
Since it's from Oscar's point of view and he is having questions and he is curious about this person he thinks is a girl, I like that a lot of stuff is unanswered. I like that they left out things from the novel because he is still like an innocent kid. Even though he is dealing with some big issues and he is having disturbing thoughts, he's still naive and has some innocence around him. This budding friendship is still innocent. We're seeing the movie through his eyes a lot of the time, and so we get this glimpse. We're not sure what it means, and information from the book has been left out of the movie on purpose. I enjoyed that it was more ambiguous because I like that it really focused more on him and trying to relate or connect to another person or thing, and that he has questions just like the audience.
And in answer to Erin's question, why is Håkon so inept? Because he's molesting these children and killing them to cover up his crime and using Ellie to help dispose of them in the novel.
Okay. So that's why they were talking about
but in the movie he's just inept. Again,
you mean he molests them, bleeds them, lets Ellie feed on them, and then
and then disposes of the body. Not a fatal flaw in the film, and none of these things are fatal flaws in the film. I still think it's a film worth watching. I think the last 15 minutes of this film, everything from when Virginia gets possessed to the pool, is excellent, top-notch, well done. I also think the relationship between Oscar and Ellie is very, very good. But I don't think this works well as a coming-of-age story because the bullies are too over the top, and every adult in this is A, an idiot, and B, so incredibly poorly fleshed out that you don't actually get the feeling of Oscar existing in this real universe. I almost half expected Oscar to be an unreliable narrator, and he's exaggerating everything in his mind because they exaggerate to a point where that didn't work for me either. So it doesn't work for me as a horror film, and it doesn't work for me as a coming-of-age story. Luckily, that's about a half an hour out of almost 2-hour film. And 90 minutes of this film is actually very good, and that is the relationship between Ellie and Oscar, which I think is really, really well done in this film. But the problem with a character-driven drama is you still have to ask, well, what's going to happen next? You have to have that sense of suspense, and where it lacks movement, and maybe why people call it slow-moving, even though I didn't think it was very slow-moving, is the direction is constantly telegraphing its punches. You don't have suspense working up to these scenes unless you're talking about the fact that the camera is static for a very long time, creating an artificial sense of suspense, which, like I said, to me, that's just a normal Swedish European film. That's any Ingmar Bergman film, the constant static shot, the wide angles, not wide-ish, the 30 to 50 millimeter angles, the low shots, the small pans, the things like that are telegraphing almost everything in this film. And so the director is telling you oh, you better get ready. Something suspenseful is about to happen. And inevitably, I feel like up until that last 15 minutes, what we see is disappointing compared to the lead up. And so that part didn't work for me. What really does work for me is just those scenes between Oscar and Ellie, such as when she crawls into his bed. And that, of course, that doesn't work on an erotic basis. It felt good as a moment where this poor picked on kid is able to, and that feeling of people getting together, well, not people, a person and a vampire being able to get together. And then that disappointment Oscar feels when he discovers that Ellie is a vampire, and Ellie's having to turn it on him, and Oscar's having to come to an acceptance with that. As Jen says, there's a really great queer romance metaphor to that for somebody just coming to terms with either their own homosexuality or general queerness or their own just attraction to somebody of the same sex. The metaphor is good, and that is good, and those scenes are good. It is the surrounding stuff that what's going to happen next stuff that doesn't work for me because the bullies are just way over the top.
I think sometimes people don't believe that it's bullying if you're not being physically hurt. They don't think that it's bad enough and they don't take it seriously, even though it definitely affects you pretty strongly. I think that might be why they made them so over the top so the audience would believe that they really were bullies.
The other thing is you have to really be rooting against them to be rooting for the ending. When you're seeing their disembodied heads and arms floating in that.
I was rooting for that. I thought they earned that. I mean, because it's so premeditated. Everybody is a killer, or at least they have the capacity to be one. And the fact that the boys try and lie to get Oscar out there, and that they've set up a trap, and that they feel very confident that they have the upper hand. And what's unnerving about the pool scene, there's a moment before where the other bullies start to question, or at least look like they're questioning, if they've gone too far. They have. They've gone past the point of no return where they do have to pay the ultimate price for it. The only one who is far enough away who doesn't has to live with what they've seen. It's sad. We've seen an escalation of bullying in schools with young people more and more, where there's cyberbullying. I think they're deep-seated wounds that stay with people for a long time after. I found it really easy to believe that the bullies in this film could be this vindictive, so malicious, with such ill intent, that I really enjoy the pool scene because there's a fantasy and wish fulfillment in seeing people be punished for poor behavior. And so I liked it.
And there was also the scene when they were whipping him. It was just the main bully that wanted to do it. The other bullies went along with it, but you could see they didn't want to. Like the blonde kid that survives at the end was the one that I think whipped him in the face, but he didn't want to do it. And, him and the other kid were like, wait, this isn't right. But they did it anyway. And I thought that was interesting too, that they're being dominated by this other little brat that's telling them what to do, and they're just going along with it.
Well, it shows all those generations of abuse and bullying. It talks about abuse on this level. I guarantee you there was other abuse in the home, and that the bully that whipped him was being bullied by the other bully, the main bully with the hat. I think it shows cycles of abuse and generations of abuse and even bullying. So they're abused by their father, their mother, their grandfather. Like, you can feel that through that. That's part of the questions of, hurt or get hurt, and hurt people, or they make choices. And then there's, again, the moral paradigms they show. It's this whole questions of good and evil and what choices you can make when you're under duress and to do or not do. And, Ely shows that in that they make moral choices, right? They kill because they have to. And then they also bled out the other character, not enough to kill them, but then they break their neck instead of entrapping them into this life of being a vampire. It's almost like a mercy killing at the end of that. There's just these interesting choices of these characters, and that's a character who I don't know that they do enough in this film to show it. Do they show enough of the weird entrappings between Ely and Hakan and their abusive relationship?
Yeah, well, when they cut out Hakan's motivation but hinted at it, you focus on the evil of the bullying because you don't have the evil of Hakan to balance it. I don't like to be one of these people, well, in the book, but there is in the book, you're following him almost hunting, and he's hunting through these same bullies. And so there is a balance there.
You said hunting through the bullies. Can you explain or elaborate that for me?
He molests some of them.
Ah, okay.
And
yeah.
Occasionally kills them to cover up his molestation. He's a child abuser.
So that's another really interesting.
So you needed the bullies to be a little bit over the top, but you didn't want it to be to the point where you were like, well, they deserve, no matter how horrible they're being, They're just kids. They don't deserve what Hokan is doing to them in the novel. So you remove that, which is the actual evil, and into that vacuum, I think, falls these bullies as being some kind of absolute evil in this film, and they're not. They're just kids.
Yeah.
So I do have sympathy, but these bullies are not realistic to me and did not strike me as realistic. Now, that may be subjective, just like the I didn't find the film scary is subjective. Those are the reasons why those portions of the movie don't work for me. But it's also subjective. I really bought the relationship between Ellie and Oscar and loved it. And those are the best scenes in the film. And build up to the best scene in the film. You don't actually see Ellie, but you know that Ellie comes to rescue Oscar from being drowned in that pool by those exact same bullies.
Since they didn't have Hokan's motivation that he was a child molester as a very clear thing in the film, that made me wonder, when we were talking about cycles, if he was the previous Oscar. Yeah, if Ellie was going through familiars by like having this child romance with them, and then they just stay forever.
Your headcanon is just as legitimate as what's written down.
And you said you bought into the relationship of Eli and Oscar as a friendship, as a romance, as like, what did your,
I don't
and
think
you've
it
watched it
matters
multiple
for two
times, what did your head
12-year-olds.
canon?
I don't think it matters for two 12-year-olds. I think at 12 years old, especially these two, it's an asexual romance anyway. So yes, I bought it as a romance, but I like that about it also, the asexuality of it, because I don't have to get involved in the fact that they were naked in the same bed, meaning something sexual. It didn't. The asexuality of their relationship made it mean more, not less to me as an absolute bond. And the ending where she's tapping the Morse code for kiss and then he taps it back works perfectly for that. She's going to be eternally 12 years old. Well, if he matures and their relationship is not an asexual one, then you're going to have as Erin pointed out, a Hokam situation.
Right, if he stays human and grows and they're sexual.
What I liked about it was the ambiguity of it, the asexuality of it, and that I didn't have to moralize about their relationship. A flaw of this film is everyone is a piece of shit except Oscar. Like I said, I almost thought there was going to be a twist at the end that Oscar was telling the story from a mental hospital and that's why everybody, or something, some kind of an unreliable narrator, because it stacks the deck so much against him. But the fact of the matter is you don't have any stacking of the deck in that relationship. And there is something, God, this is a corny word, but there's something pure about it with all the shittiness that's going on in this film around it. Because the adults are all shitty, the kids are all shitty, the teachers are all shitty. But there's just kind of a purity about this relationship. That's the best element of the film. And that's why that and its last 15 minutes when Virginia gets turned and she's hospitalized through the ending in the pool makes this film definitely worth watching. It's not as good as I remember, and it doesn't hold together as well. Had the film been scarier, I don't think I would be shitting on it as much if it had some genuine scares in it. Nothing in this film scared me. Fundamentally, that's what I go to a horror film for, and because it failed me on that, I think everything else became a house of cards.
I don't think it was trying to overly jump scare. I don't think it was designed that way at all, is the way it comes across to me, that it's more, I don't know, supernatural, psychological horror.
I don't think
drama.
I don't think jump scares scare me, quite honestly. I don't think a
Ever.
jump scare
So
works. So I don't think it's the lack of, jump scares. I do think a slow pace works really, really well. The Shining is one of the most terrifying. Even the floors were scary in The Shining. Instead of the floors in The Shining, we get that ridiculous jungle gym.
I mean, it's a place for them to meet and sit, and it looks like the rest of whatever was there was under the snow. You're looking at that from the photography framing, right? That's the movie making frame of mind, which is
Yeah, you're
interesting.
right. You're right. Yeah, and it's
Which
visually
is interesting.
repetitive. It is a visually repetitive film with the static shots, and that's why a lot of the punches, I think, get telegraphed so much. He's creating these kind of visual codas with a static, low angle, shot, followed by when you do get the upper angle, the high angle, oh, shit's gonna go down, and he's showing his cards too much. The criticism that I often get, okay, you're holding this up to, how can you like Love Lies Bleeding, which was my favorite film of last year. I hear all the time, no, that was so mid. How come you were so hard on Oppenheimer but loved Love Lies Bleeding? And it's because it worked for me, and this didn't.
I'd say that this film, it's subtle, and I like that it hides a lot of the violence. A lot of the violence takes place off camera or behind like just a barely open door. But I also think it plays into the fact that it's centered around like two young children, and specifically one who is just being aware that there are other things in the world that he doesn't understand. And so I like that he's our, point of view into the darkness around these, vampires. And I think you're being a little overly harsh. I like the jungle gym. I like the introduction of her character being on the top and jumping down, and that's how we're introduced to her and him and their relationship, and that she's always out in the snow without a coat.
Or shoes.
Yeah, without shoes. Those little subtlety things were
that's a great one. That when you finally get the close up of her feet in the hospital and you see that they're all red and gnarled. Now in the novel, she could turn her hands and feet into claws. That's something that it did better than the novel, was those gnarled feet of hers, as opposed to the turning them into claws. That terrified me more than I think. Well, especially if they'd used CGI, the claws would have. Those feet with the nails and how reddened they were, and just how haggard they looked, the way she walks over rocks and through snow in the bare feet, and they did a really, really good job with that.
I like all different types of horror films and subgenres of horror, and this isn't a scary horror film, but it is an unnerving and uneasy part of the subgenre of horror that it's dealing with young children and creatures and supernatural elements, and so I find it unnerving, and I was invested in what's going to happen to Oscar, and that sense of dread and that sense of unease, you're anticipating what's going to happen. You're saying they're telegraphing everything, but I was waiting for the confrontation with the bullies, and I did want to see them get their comeuppance. Even though, Oscar is a little messed up, and just the introduction.
That's not, and that I am not going to take a moment and say that there's anything wrong with your opinion, because horror is the most subjective art form that there is. I think even above comedy, everything about horror is subjective. What works for you, and I don't want to even say what scares you, but what works on you is completely subjective. I'm pointing out why this didn't work for me, why the pacing, which I almost felt like this had a fairy tale type pacing. I didn't feel it was slow paced. I felt it was had a kind of a dreamy pace, and shot after shot of snow when they're out skating, and the bit of humor about the check out for the holy, and then suddenly the discovery of the body. He's still using the dreamy type imagery when you see the body being hauled out, when the kids discover the body and the body being hauled out. If you are attempting to create a thriller or a horror film, then it needs thrills and it needs horrors, and this film just didn't have any for me. And so maybe so when you say I'm being overly harsh on it, maybe that's why it disappointed me more than it would have. Is because that's what I was expecting.
I didn't take it as a horror film, honestly. It was more about the relationship and the story of them together than any.
Well, Erin,
of the horror
was
elements.
it a fairy tale then to you? So if that's correct, then he got the mood right. If it felt that way for you,
it didn't really feel like a fairy tale either. It felt like just like the coming of age story we've been talking about. That's what it felt like more to me. About it's just the lives of these two kids, even though one of them is very, very old and has been 12 for a long time, as they said. I think that the horror elements to it were incidental to the rest of the film. It wasn't about those, it was about the relationship. And I think that might be why it didn't come across as scary. I didn't find anything scary about it either. Unsettling, but not scary.
I'll tell you, last spring we did a coming-of-age vampire film that I thought handled this material 100 times better. What's the title, Nicole? God, that long-ass title. You know the one.
It is a long title. Is it Consenting Vampire Seeks Suicide? Something suicidal. We'll have to look it up. It's a long one.
Humanist Vampire.
I would say that characters are older though. So I
Yeah.
mean, you brought up that these ones are
True,
asexual.
true.
I Since they are so young, it really is about friendship and connecting, and so I find that relatable in this movie. I'll look up the other title real quick, just a second.
Humanist vampire seeks consenting suicidal person.
Say that 5 times fast.
Thank
Or
you.
say it
Also,
in French. No, I'm joking. Don't,
I
don't.
don't think I could get it right in
We're not
French.
gonna we're not gonna do a John Dielman.
I mean,
Sometimes the static shots of this kind of did remind me of John Dielman. The interiors, it's like when the mother's in the kitchen. That, the way that it's kind of shot from a shoulder, that kind of did remind me a little bit of John Dielman there. Not in a good way.
I think parts
why?
of this are horrifying, not like standard things of horror. I think the concept of it being like the legitimate old school fairy tale is a good thing to say. Like these moral allegories, these dark choices, these dark things.
You're starting to sell me a little bit on it. I'm not saying I
Yeah.
was being too harsh, but I don't think it's a great directed film. And I don't think that's going to change my opinion. And I did see something back in 2009 when I first saw it. So, I'm open-minded.
Yeah, it's not a bad film at all. It's just not necessarily one that you enjoy, and that's fine. But yeah, I definitely didn't see it as horror at all. So yeah.
The way that Ellie baits people in, like the way they wrapped and killed, that was pretty. I mean, they showed that, didn't show it up close. They show the aftermath up close, but like the being a victim and then wrapping themselves around them, and that's pretty horrifying, right?
Oh yeah,
And
And
definitely.
did
twisted.
you notice the motif of constantly overhead shots for those when you see
Well,
Ellie
no, not when
attacking
she's
someone?
under the bridge. When she
But
baits the
the angle
first
is from
a
from a
little bit
crane.
above and far away, you
Yeah,
mean?
it's from a crane. Yeah, and then when she attacks Virginia, it's directly above her head. Is a good idea to create these kind of motifs, these codas, if you will. The problem is, as soon as he went to an overhead shot every time in the film, I was like, oh, well, okay, someone's going to die. And unfortunately, I was right.
You're saying even a subtle crane, because from the under the bridge, when they're lying there and pulling the guy from the bar, I don't think it's that high up.
No, it's
I
not.
mean,
It's not. It's not. But it
it's
is.
just a little bit elevated, you're saying.
But compared
Yeah.
to most of the hi-hat shots, the static hi-hat shots, which are underneath, I mean, you can see the ceiling in most of the interiors in this because the camera is so low. Or when Hokan walks into the deli and you have the panning shot where it goes from one window to the other to the door to him coming in. That's normal. That's a 15 millimeter lens on a hi hat sitting on top of a table. That's how your normal shots throughout this are. And then anytime he switches from that to something higher above, it's a very violent scene. Anytime he switches to something below where it looks like the hi-hat was taken and kind of put it on the ground or on the floor, that seems to be showing some kind of a movement in the relationship between Ellie and Oscar. And so these are the visual motifs that he's set up. It creates a visual sense of poetry. Downside is, in horror, you need to mix it up some. So you need, he's shooting from this low angle, so everything's going to be fine in this scene. And it's not. And so, for instance, in the bathroom scene, the second he went to a high shot, I was like, oh, he's going to try and kill that girl because he gave it away.
I think there's a lot of power dynamics going on throughout the film, and I think it's best illustrated in the pool scene where there's the tracking shot showing the older brother walking to the side of the pool. He takes out his knife, and then he's kneeling in front of Oscar. And in that scene, in that power dynamic, Oscar is the weakest because
Wouldn't change a thing about that. That tracking shot is beautifully done, and that's what I'm talking about when I say creates the anticipation, and then you get the payoff. Beautiful, great scene, great shot. I love everything about it.
I do wonder though why when the bully said, come here, he swam toward him instead of swimming towards the middle where they couldn't reach him. But that was kind of an odd choice for this kid.
They were suckering him earlier to make him feel like, oh, we admire you now because you struck him down, and that was to get him to drop his guard.
Okay.
So multiple watches from a technical standpoint changes your what you're seeing, right? You already know what's coming and you're starting to see things in a different frame. Can I challenge the pool scene? Like it's a build up and a perfect payoff. Doesn't that happen even in the other screens? Like when she's baiting him and then wraps around the guy and kills him, or the scene when they're in the bed, when gets in the bed and then slides her hand down his arm and they hold hands. Like those are setups and payoff then, aren't they?
Horror to me is about anticipation. My mind is going to what my mind can imagine is going to be worse than you can possibly show me on screen, either legally or for technical reasons. And so you have to build that up, and you have to let my mind wander. Those attacks are a disappointment, and I hate to say this, some of them are laughable.
But
I
the one
laugh.
under the bridge, you know it's coming. You know it's coming. Like
Yep.
I thought they built it up, and then you didn't think it was horrifying that she like glommed onto him, not even
Nope.
just
I
wrapping
giggled.
around his.
No, I giggled.
Huh.
It looked like a terrier trying to take down a tackle dummy. I mean, it didn't.
I mean, it's a
It was
small flail, 12-year-old body
flailing
that's learned
and biting on. Yeah,
flailing.
yeah,
They
yeah.
don't flail when he kills the
I
guy
didn't
under the
see any
bridge. He just
flailing.
totally wraps on, tightens on,
Yeah.
asphyxiates.
Well,
Like
okay.
it's
No,
it's
the guy is
honed its
failing with
hunting
her
techniques.
body around him. Yeah,
Well, yeah,
Oh,
but
yeah,
what
maybe.
else is he gonna do? If he can't get the kid off of him, he's gonna be flailing his arms
yeah.
around
And
to
I found that
try to
comic.
dislodge
Like,
him.
oh my god, what am I gonna do? Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh,
that.
that's part of the horror
that
for you. Like you're like this big strong man could have just pounded this 12-year-old into the wall and gotten them off, or used their strength, their
I think.
manliness to get them off.
I think a vampire strength is something that we know about from vampire lore, so I would buy that part. You're right, I would, but I didn't buy it there because it doesn't. It wasn't done well.
I thought it was super creepy. I thought, the whole glomming like an octopus on this guy and taking him down. That was, yeah, that was super unsettling.
I mean, they could have done more dramatic things, but they had honed their ability to kill in a way to be
Yeah,
quick. And then,
that's what made it feel more realistic to me. That, I mean, it's a vampire film. It's not realistic, but it looked like what would happen if a vampire tricked somebody into coming over, got them off balance, and just got them. I thought that
And
was
we've talked about
really
that before, Aaron. You said
what.
before, and you always said it had to do with your being diagnosed as autistic, but that it didn't matter whether you thought something could happen. It's whether you believed it at the time you're watching it in the film that it is happening.
Yeah, and I believed it in the
And it
film.
worked. It worked for you that way, which is
Yeah,
great. Which is great, and I'm glad everybody loved this film. And I don't like shitting on movies. As a matter of fact, this and Oppenheimer are probably the only two on here where I have. But I'm also not going to come on here and give a different opinion than my own.
I think it's funny though that I didn't love the film. I thought it was a good film. I didn't love it, but now I have to defend it because you didn't like it.
And that's why we make a good team, Aaron. The yin to my yang.
Yep.
Just like you said, you didn't really hate China as near all that much until you heard how much I liked it. It's so
I just
yeah,
didn't
it's almost.
understand it.
Yeah.
It's a weird one.
I will say there's not too much that's not understandable about this film. And the novel that it was based on is a much more complex work. And they did do a very good job of distilling this down and making it a very accessible film out of a novel that wasn't as accessible. And I do give them credit for that. And it's probably why the film is so popular, even though it's in a different language, is because they did make a very accessible horror film.
I mean, I wonder if they have made a longer director's cut, or like this is a whole nother thing of films having to be 2 hours and now they can be 3 hours and 4 hours, which is a whole nother thing. They cut out some things. They made choices, right? There are always choices of what people edit out. And it's interesting sometimes when you see, you're like, oh, that makes sense. And there are other times you're like, wow, they could have left that part in. Like, I think the whole allegory with more about Hokan or Hakan being a pedophile, making that a little more clear. Because you're saying it would be very clear. And I bet there's some people that miss things in this movie without,
I'm not
on
saying it would
first
be
watch
very
without.
clear. I'm saying quite the opposite, that I knew it because it was in the novel, and that
Oh, I thought
throwaway
you said it
line
was
wasn't
clear.
enough. Same with Ellie having been castrated as a child. I both of those things I knew because they were in the novel. Either if you're going to here's what I said: if you're going to eliminate them as stories, then eliminate them completely, as opposed to putting these hints in here that only either people who read the novel or people who, after the fact, go research it, go find out. When they did the remake in 2010, Matt Reeves, his whole point was, well, I'm not going to remake the film. I'm going to do a different adaptation of the novel that's closer to the novel. He was able to, he was able to focus on those elements a little bit more, although, again, I don't think it's a great film. I think it's not as bad as people say it is, and it deserved to do better at the box office. Let Me In, the 2010 adaptation of this remake, if you want to say.
I was thinking a few minutes ago, you were in summing up this movie, you said it was clearer than that's where I was going.
No, what I was saying was clear. What I was saying was clearer in this film is the relationship between Ellie and Oscar. I think they did a very good job keeping that and simplifying it. And yeah, I think that, and I do give them credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great, that
the other
relationship
thing, those
is
are just
a lot
throwaways. The one shot of her crotch or their crotch, and the line about he likes children for the wrong reason. Those are just absolute throwaways. You could blink and miss both of them, or well, because of subtitles, blink and miss both of them.
I think
and the film wouldn't be any different to you.
The fact that they're so subtle, though, suggests that there are other things more dangerous or worse than maybe a vampire, or like just the fact that we're introduced to him being a murderer, even though he's an inept murderer, he's still a dangerous person. So I like how subtle it is with just a line here or a suggested shot. I still really like the movie. I would rather watch this one again than the remake. The remake, I think the special effects in that one, aside from the car crash scene, are pretty awful. And they made some of the casting didn't work for me. So I like this iteration best.
Well, and they made her too young for the film to work. So it had a fatal flaw that this film doesn't have.
True. But I also think they also cast her in the remake of Carrie, and like I thought she was too cute and pretty for Carrie. We're like, there's something special about Sissy Spacek's performance that is still original and haunting, and it's unorthodox, and she brought a certain physicality to that role that I think a lot of these new Hollywood remakes just aren't bringing. I'm curious to see what Mike Flanagan does with his new iteration of Carrie. I think it's a series, and so we'll see. But I think still very much like the Sissy Spacek version.
I wish they'd stop remaking things that were great. Because, like, if you want to remake something, take something that was crap and make it great. Don't take something that's a classic,
right,
and try to cash in on, oh, you like this then, here you'll like this one now, because you're not going to get it the same way.
And to Matt Reeves' credit, he didn't just remake this. He did decide to do a completely different version that was much closer to he decided to adapt the novel, and a lot of the flaws and what's wrong with the remake, in inverted commas, are what's wrong with the novel that this film does better, and this is a better film than that because of it. So take from that what you will. She is younger or she is made to be younger and have a much more immature attitude in the novel, and they grow her up here so that she's on Oscar's level, and I think that was a good choice as well.
Also, that they dubbed over the actual actress's voice to make her sound more masculine. I thought that was a really interesting choice too.
Yeah, and that worked. Jennifer, what were your final thoughts on Let the Right One In? And are you still interested in watching the American remake?
I am still interested in watching the American remake. I may get fatigued. Sometimes I do this and then I get fatigued out, but I think it'd be worth watching that on its own, and then I don't know if it's worth reading the novel or not. Apparently, there's even a short story that picks up at the end of one of the other stories, which I think is interesting. I think it's worth a watch, this film, this Swedish version of Let the Right One In, and it's, still spooky season. And I think even this through the winter on this in the northern hemisphere will be a great watch. See the things that can happen in the dark and the cold and the choices one makes, and can cycles be broken, right? Cycles of abuse or things, or are we trapped in these things, and the tale of good and evil. And then there's the whole, I want to know what people think, like, about the relationship. I'm curious for more input from more people about the relationship on Ellie and Oscar. And I say it's a queer movie with some non-binary at the moment because of their ages and possibly because of their relationship and the choices they've been forced into, at least for a while. And an ace, frozen in time ace relationship, so that part's cool. I had no idea it was queer horror, and yay for that. It's fun, and I'm glad to have been part of the conversation, and I'll be really curious to see the things that people say. If I rewatch it, it's that whole thing is once you get behind the curtain. I'm wondering if that's part of what's happened with you. The more you know about the movie making, magic or not magic, the more, ignore the man behind the curtain and the Wizard of Oz, the more you start seeing things and you see choices and camera angles and framing and how that can sweeten or sour one's view of
It
what
makes
you're
bad
watching.
films worse and great films better.
Mm,
It's always been
yeah.
my answer to that.
Oh, that's a good way to say that. Yeah. It's just an interesting thing that, right, when people make great decisions, I guess it comes through with a greater product. And, you know, I think this film is worth a watch and worth a discussion. And there were some really, so I mean, like the snow in the window and those black and whites, which is just the dark and those sounds, like it frames the film at the beginning and the end. I love the quote unquote really twisted moral happy ending of, them they're going away on a train, which is always sort of something on relationships and movement and hope for what's going forward. Sometimes a sexual allegory. There's not a train going in a tunnel, but uh there's the train, and the that they're still communicating through this barrier but still connected, Oscar and Eli, and the little smirk. And this, they don't make it clear in the version I saw that they were tapping kiss, but I did try to slow down and look at the Morse code, and then I looked and found it somewhere because I was like, what are they saying? They didn't tell us what they were saying in the version that I watched. And I was like, that's got to be relevant.
I don't know if they made
I,
it clear in the version I watched either, or if I got that from the novel and just placed it there,
uh,
to be honest.
somewhere I read it, they spelled puss, Puss, which is a Swedish version for a small kiss, is what I read somewhere. I think is how I got it. I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I watched it, and I hope other people watch it. And I think it's uh, right. It's one of those weird things that it can be. There's a romance, there's moral allegory, there's some horrifying elements. It's thoughtful. It's psychological, twisty horror and horrifying in times. And I did believe the bullies, so I I've seen bullies that bad, and I think they made you really not like the bullies, and then also see that the bullies are trapped in their own cycle of abuse and victim, and just, it's that whole, are they making choices, or are they really making that whole predeterminism, like they're making choices that they were already trapped into or predetermined to make? It brings up those questions as well. So I will be curious to see thoughts of what other people say. I will recommend a watch and hope that I can get some other people to watch it and talk about it. And I will watch the other one and then want to talk about it. We'll see how far I go with the series or the book. And I don't know if I thought I heard that Nicole hadn't watched the series, so that'll be interesting to see what we get out of that. I appreciate the opportunity, and I really look forward to people writing in the comments or continuing this conversation for us, because that part's fun. We want to hear what other people have to say. That's the fun of talking about film with community. And the people listening are our community, so please write and tell us what you think. That's what I say to that.
Jennifer, where can people find you on the internet, and where can they find the Gilbert Baker Film Festival?
Gilbert Baker Film Festival .lgbt is our website, and also on, I think the easiest place, Instagram is where most film people are. So Gilbert Baker Film Fest there, and there is a link tree there where you can find all our other socials. We are on all the things. We're still on the X and TikTok. Love to grow our
The
TikTok if you're
artist
TikTok
formerly
people.
known as Twitter, please.
Yeah, I was gonna say at the artist formerly known as Twitter. We are still sort of on there. I'm not super active, but I do move on there. We're on all sorts of spaces. If we're gonna ask for a plug, love follows on all the things. We do have a YouTube channel, though we don't really put a lot on there. That will grow in time. TikTok I'd love some growth before TikTok changes. Please and thank you.
Nicole, your final thoughts on Let the Right One In?
Yeah, I still stand by. I think Let the Right One In is a fun coming of age adolescent vampire film full of atmospheric dread and a lot of growing pains. So please give it a watch, and we'd love to know what you think. You can follow more of what I'm doing on Dark Rainbow Films on Instagram and the Blood and Popcorn Film Festival on Instagram. We'll be opening up submissions soon and hoping to host another festival in Oakland in January. And I'm still chugging along making my vampire film. So if you want to find out more, there's details on the Dark Rainbow Films on Instagram.
I wanted to put that in there. If you care about a sapphic vampire film, which I hope that you do, a queer film that is in the making, you can be part of helping create a sapphic story, a sapphic vampire film. So by supporting Dark Rainbow Films and Nicole De Meneses and Last Bite, there is a fundraiser. Please, please, please allow Nicole and Dark Rainbow Films to create the film that they really want to by allowing them their budget, access to their budget, and not tying their hands with budget on the choices that they make. They will make a great film regardless, but I really want to see what's going to happen if Nicole gets their budget, the big high dream budget, in fact. So anyone out there that can help, please do.
If you don't do it for Nicole, do it for Jennifer, Erin, and I so we can see the film, or just do it for the memory of Ingrid Pitt's boobs in Vampire Hunters. She would have wanted to see this film. Erin,
OMG.
Erin, your final thoughts on Let the Right One In and where people can find you and us on the internet.
It was a really unusual film. I haven't seen anything quite like this, which, is, I think it's a good thing. I like seeing unique stuff. I hadn't really thought about a love story between a kid vampire and a human kid in this at all, but in this particular way, it was really something else. It's not my favorite film. I probably am not going to watch it again. I'm probably not going to look for the American version because the story did have that ick factor that the kid was being molested, and that's horrible. And if there's more of that in the American version, I really don't want that in my life. I think it was definitely worth a watch. There was a lot to it that I really liked. I liked the effects of Ellie as a vampire. When they climbed that wall, that was amazing. And it built its own lore. So the vampire followed its own rules for being a vampire. Like, I hadn't seen what happens if I don't invite you in and you come in anyway. I'd never seen that happen in a movie. They usually just don't mention it, or like in the TV series What We Do in the Shadows, they physically couldn't enter, and which was pretty funny to watch. Yeah, I think it was definitely worth a watch. And you can find me on Blue Sky at Toad Puppy and on YouTube at Pizza Horse Productions. And you can follow World Cinema History on our webpage, ko-fi.com/World Cinema History. We've got older episodes on there. Everything's posted. You can come and watch them, and you can leave comments, and you can, give us a tip so we can buy better equipment and keep this podcast ad-free.
Thanks, Erin. And you can follow me at the artist formerly known as Twitter at ETROMMATER. I'm also on Letterboxd, in which we have any film that we've done. So right now, 86 links to the episodes, and that's ETROMMATER on Letterboxd. Next week, we're going to take a week off watching films, and we're going to do a retrospective on Mark Redfield, who we lost last week. We're also going to have several guests speak about him, and we're going to have clips from the 6 episodes that he was generous enough to do for us. So join us next week for remembering Mark Redfield, and thank you very much for listening to World Cinema History.